There are things that I have seen through life, and sometimes I wonder, God from heaven, what is it that you would need us to do? I remember one day I was working in Hospice Africa. Then I had a student placement, and I had the opportunity of working in a hospital. Walked in two, and I saw many things, but I will never forget the things I experienced when I was working in hospice. And I remember we used to go in hospitals, we used to do hospital visits, and I went to the cancer wards. And I saw people die every day, especially children. And I saw children who had a huge chance of survival if they had chemotherapy in a time when our government could not afford to buy chemotherapy for children. I was there, I nursed, I saw, I prayed, I wrote case journals, I wrote wills for those women which were dying. I counseled and comforted them until the last minute, and in some instances these kids would send for you before they were going to die. And I remember those days, a certain lady came to the nation and saw these young people dying, and then she went and sold all her property and gave it into a fund, and that fund could only fund one kind of cancer, which was Hodgkin's lymphoma, which, you know, those swellings, those things that when the kids swell their faces. And they used, during that time, they told us, I don't know whether the statistics have changed, but that children suffering from Hodgkin's lymphoma had 70% survival rate if they were put on chemotherapy, and we saw many heal. And then we had those which had Burkitt's lymphoma. It used to hit the muscles and stuff. Those had about 50% survival rate. And because there was very little money to avail, the program only sponsored Hodgkin's lymphoma. It did not sponsor Burkitt's lymphoma, the kids who had only even up to 50% chance. In that time, we saw people die, kids die. And then sometimes some of the people within the same rooms would afford chemotherapy, and so sometimes they would inject some with chemotherapy, and some would get to know that their neighbor got chemotherapy, and they looked at chemotherapy as a savior. And you see a kid crying because they cannot access chemotherapy, and many of them were given morphine. They were high the whole day until the day they left the earth. I have seen things in this life, and during that time, I could not help to see some of the people that were on television, and they were accused of robbing money. It was a very hard thing to conceive that they also had children who they also wish had big dreams and went to universities and stuff like that. I'm not here to bore you about that, but I'm saying life can be so hard when you're coming from this world.